If you've ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix and would like to share it with the channel, just go to astheravendreams.com and then click the button to send your story my way. And of course, thank you. I think my husband actually experienced a reality shift or a Matrix glitch because of some of the things he's mentioned to me lately about small things. He actually told me about the actual glitch that he knows happened, but he says that after that there have been things that are weird to him that he's been noticing. We're both pretty big into weird things like glitches in the Matrix and paranormal things, but he never expected to experience one of his own. I guess I should start with the actual glitch that my husband experienced. He and my son were out picking up food from the grocery store for dinner, which is not something he normally has to do, nor does he volunteer to do it. However, on that specific day, he had actually mentioned that he wanted to go to the store, and my son wanted to go with him, so they went out together. Fine by me, one less thing I have to do in the end. He told me that, while they were there, they were walking around grabbing things and they went down the aisle with the condiments. He had grabbed a bottle of mustard, because we were out, and then moved on to the next aisle to get something, when my son randomly remembered that we were also out of ketchup, because he had used the last of it the day before on his spaghetti. I know that's weird, don't ask. I'm not going to question him on why he puts ketchup on spaghetti. Anyways, my husband says that he'll go grab it, and tells my son to stay there since it was only an aisle away. He headed over to get it, and he said that it wasn't there, which made no sense, since it was the same aisle that they had just gone down. He then looked up, and he noticed that he was actually in the bread aisle, about 2 aisles down the store. He mentioned that he had somehow literally walked 1 aisle over, but then ended up 3 aisles away from where he started. He even verified this by walking back to where the condiments were, and going 1 more aisle and making sure that our son was still standing there, and he was. Obviously, this makes no sense, and he says that it felt like he had almost somehow teleported to the bread aisle. But he moved on, grabbed the ketchup, and then finished shopping, and was just super excited to tell me about what he experienced. Well, that's not where the weirdness ends. He said that now there are strange little things that are different that he's struggling to accept. The first thing he mentioned was my laptop. I do work as a graphic designer, and I work for a small company that does visual designs for larger corporations. Because of COVID, my position is now a fully remote one, and I have a room dedicated to being my office, which is a room that the other 2 typically don't go into. The other day, I was working on something, and my husband had to come in to tell me something else, and as soon as he walked up to my desk, he paused, and started staring at my work computer. I asked him what was going on, and he asked me where my MacBook was. I have literally never used a Mac. I don't personally like the operating system on Apple computers and have always had a standard Windows-based laptop. I told him this and he responded with, "No, you had a MacBook Pro. I remember you and me sitting down to look at what you could order through your work, and we chose a really beefy Mac because that's what they wanted you to have. I recall the conversation you had with your boss where they told you the whole team was moving to Apple computers and you were upset about it." I told him that that had never happened, and I had no idea what he was talking about. We had a small argument about it, nothing too severe, just a disagreement, and we moved on. One of the other events that happened was when we went to order pizza last weekend. My husband was asking what we wanted, and my son said that he wanted pepperoni. My husband immediately stopped and just stared at him like he had grown a third arm or something. He then started going on about how much my son hated pepperoni, and said that he always asked for a cheese pizza, extra cheese, add chicken. My son has no memory of ever asking for this, and as far back as I can remember, my son has always loved pepperoni. Obviously, this was another thing that upset my husband, but we got our pizza and we moved on. I actually had a conversation with him about all this, and he told me that there are other small things that have been eating away at him that have changed. Things like the neighbors' cars are different from what he remembers, and one of the neighbors seems to live in a different house than what he remembered. He also mentioned that he was confused that I had eaten clams the other day, since he swears I was allergic to shellfish. There were a few other things about our son and about our home that he said felt different. I tried to talk to him about them, but I can tell that it's really upsetting him. And he then mentioned that he thinks he's either losing it, or he has shifted to a different existence. Obviously, nothing seems out of place for me, other than his behavior and how he's feeling and acting about things. For the record, he has no mental health issues, he doesn't use drugs or drink, and he hasn't suffered any injuries. And all of these things just started happening after he had that weird event at the grocery store. So, I've been lurking here for a while, and I decided I would post something that happened to me about a year ago. I think you guys might find it interesting. I don't understand what the hell happened at all, and still to this day I cannot shake it. I was in the garage one night about a year ago. Now, my garage connects to the house through a door that I usually keep open, as I tend to go in and out all night working on things. From the garage, you can, from close to the door, see straight up to the back door of the house. It's a small townhouse, and is basically a straight line. So, I was working on the desk in the garage. The TV was off as I was close to finishing up for the night and going to bed. As I was looking at my projects on the desk, I heard a noise from the kitchen. I'm pretty used to the cat jumping through plastic bags and thought nothing of it for a second. I looked over at a box and the cat was sitting on top of it fast asleep. It was at that moment my dog starts barking from the lounge room, which is just beyond the doorway to the garage. So, thinking not much of it, he barks randomly all the time, if something falls off the bench, etc. I went towards the garage door. As I approached the doorway, the dog was barking much louder. I hear what I can only describe as loud, heavy footsteps start running from the kitchen across the tiles toward the garage. And I can hear it clear as day. My first thought of this is it's a threat, so I put my hands up ready to throw a punch at whoever comes through the door. And it just stops. Nothing. The dog is still barking, but nothing. I waited a few seconds and thought, oh hell, he's waiting for me. So I grab a piece of pipe and went to the doorway carefully, ready for some robber to jump at me. But it's nothing. There's no one there. The dog's watching me like nothing happened. It took me only a few minutes to realize that the house was locked up, and only myself and my fiancé, who was in bed upstairs, were there. As I went over it in my head, I realized something. Important detail to note, my family has very heavy footsteps, like annoyingly so. If I'm upstairs, I have to walk carefully, as I'm basically thumping across the floor with my heel usually. The footsteps sounded exactly like mine. The heavyweight heel-like running sounded exactly like mine. I even ran from the kitchen to the garage again a few days later to see if it sounded the same. A year later, I can't shake it. Something or someone mimicked me, or it was me. I know my own footsteps, and they were 100% mine, but I sure as hell don't get it. I've been lurking on this sub for years now, and I've desperately wanted to experience a glitch, but aside from several DOPs, I've had nothing. And then yesterday, it finally happened. It's rather boring as far as glitches go, but I asked and the universe delivered. So, who am I to complain? Anyways, here it is. I like to listen to podcasts while I go about my daily routine, usually while exercising, cleaning, or putting on makeup. If I don't have anything else to do, I'll do a jigsaw puzzle or paint by numbers. Yesterday I was finishing up a paint by numbers painting, and coincidentally listening to a podcast on glitches. It's important to note the way that I go about completing the paintings. I always do one color at a time, and since the paintings are large, I invariably miss a few spots here and there, but I'll go back and paint those as I find them. At this point, my painting was almost finished, and I was on the last color. But there was one spot that I had left because paint from an adjacent spot had smeared over the number, and I couldn't tell what it was. The painting kit comes with the paper version of the painting, with the numbers on it for that exact reason. So I referred to the paper, saw that it was a 5, pink, and I painted it. I distinctly remember doing this. I made sure to use plenty of paint so that it would cover the smudged paint underneath. There was a spot adjacent to this that I needed to paint, but I decided to move on to another section in order to let the pink dry a bit first. After working on another part of the painting, I went back to that section, and the pink that I had just painted was completely gone. Vanished. It looked exactly as it had before, with the brown paint smudged and obscuring the number. There is no explanation for this. I am 100% sure that I painted the spot. I remember I had to rinse my brush before and after, as it was a different color. I remember making sure to completely cover the paint underneath. Even if I had accidentally brushed my arm across it, it wouldn't completely disappear like that. I've made mistakes before, and even when I notice immediately and wipe it away with a paper towel, it still leaves a residue. There was absolutely nothing there aside from the brown paint that had smudged over the number. It looked exactly like it had before I painted it. How? So, there's my glitch. It's kind of silly and boring, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. I should stop complaining and own my glitch with pride. Maybe the universe will provide me with something more interesting next time. I have a pretty short but weird glitch that happened to me just a few months ago. I don't get to see my mother too often, so when I do see her, I try to do something nice for her, to show her that while I don't get to see her as much as I'd like to, I do appreciate and love her. 2 things to know about my mom that are important for this story. She loves pie. Specifically pie from this little bakery that we used to go to when I was a kid, and she is deathly allergic to strawberries. The bakery is near where I live. I stayed in my hometown, and she actually moved a couple of hours away, so she doesn't get to go there really anymore. Last month was my mother's birthday, and it was one of the times where I decided I needed to drive out and see her. Because it was her birthday, I wanted to surprise her with one of the pies from the bakery that she loved. I called them, I put an order in for an apple pie, and then 1 strawberry rhubarb. Unlike my mother, I am not allergic to strawberries, and strawberry rhubarb is my absolute favorite. When I went to pick it up, I spoke with the bakery owner about my mom. They used to be really good friends, and I verified with her which pie was which because of my mom's allergy. She had actually cut a small bit of the center of the crust out of the strawberry rhubarb pie so that you could see that it was red, and I could tell without a doubt which one was strawberry. and which one was apple. She'd box them as per the norm, but the boxes just folded closed, so you could easily open them to see the pie and know which one was which. I thanked her, and I left. I decided to run my strawberry pie home so that it would never be anywhere near my mom or her place. I got home, opened the box, made sure I was putting the correct pie in the fridge at home, and then left to go see my mother. I won't go into the full detail of our day together. I'll just say it was a great day and she was beyond happy to see both myself and the pie. Though, I do want to mention that she never opened the box to the pie until the end of the evening. We were wrapping up the visit, and she asked me if I wanted to have some of the apple pie that I had bought. I said I would absolutely stay for a slice. She grabbed the pie, opened the box, and cut into it. I was immediately upset when I saw red coming up with the knife. As soon as I saw that, I told her to stop and I took over cutting it. Sure enough, it was a strawberry rhubarb pie, not the apple one. I was confused. The baker was always good at making sure to keep them properly marked, and I had never gotten the wrong one from her, but mistakes do happen. So, I assumed that she may have just given me the wrong one. I apologized to my mother and I told her that I would be back the next day with her apple pie. And I just mentioned that I must have grabbed the wrong one when I left my house, or that they may have gotten the order wrong. When I got home, I opened the pie that I had brought back with me, and something just felt weird about it. Because, as I'd mentioned before, she said she had cut some of the crust off for an opening for me so I could tell which was which told me that she was being careful about the whole thing. This pie had no pieces from the center missing, though. My initial assumption was that she had just handed me 2 strawberry ones instead of a strawberry and an apple. But then I pulled mine out of the fridge to look at it. When I did, I was even more confused. There was a small window cut into the crust, but the filling was a white and brown color, like it was apple cinnamon. When I left the bakery, I remembered looking at the pies and seeing that the one with the little window was the strawberry one. I remember the dark red filling. When I put mine in the fridge, that's how I verified that I was grabbing the right one. There was red in the crust. But yet, when I got home from my mother's, it was white, with cinnamon. I have no idea how the pies got switched, or how at some point the one with the window was apple instead of strawberry, but at some point in time everything got changed and flipped to be the opposite of what it really was. I know this isn't creepy, just weird, so hopefully your audience will still enjoy it, but to me, it was the strangest thing I have ever experienced. Obviously, I took the correct pie out to my mother's place the next day, and I just told her that I had grabbed the wrong one, without explaining the weird Matrix pie swap that happened. When I was 16, I took an SAT prep class to improve my score and get into a good college. The class was pretty boring, but I met the most interesting girl in the class. She was thin, fairly short, with light brown hair and green eyes. She always wore a green headband, which I thought was cute. Her name was Connie. We hit it off immediately and spent most of the class whispering to each other side by side at our desks. I spent about 3 weeks sitting next to her and talking during the class. When the class was over, we exchanged IM handles so that we could keep in touch. This was in the early 2000s. About a year passed, and we continued talking online. We got to know each other pretty well, but we lived on completely different sides of the city, and it was quite a drive to visit each other. So, being the young teens that we were, we never actually got together. Eventually, I worked up the courage to ask her out for dinner. I set up a date at a restaurant located between the both of us so that she wouldn't have to drive too far. The time for our date rolled around, and I headed to the restaurant to meet her. I walked in and I saw her sitting in a booth with two older individuals at the far side of the establishment. She looked exactly like she did in class. Thin, light brown hair, green eyes, and she was wearing her signature green headband. I approached her and said hello. I gave her a hug and sat down next to her in the booth. I assumed these two older individuals across from us were her parents. Odd, I thought, but maybe they were there to chaperone. I could immediately tell that something was wrong. The two older individuals looked very confused, surprised, and almost bewildered. The look on Connie's face was also one of perplexity. Eventually she said, "Who are you?" I was shocked. I said, I'm Jason. Remember? We set up a date for tonight. I assume these are your parents. It's very nice to meet you." And I reached out my hand to shake her parents' hands. They didn't return my handshake. Instead, they simply looked at their daughter and said, "Oh, did you forget to tell us this, Sarah?" "Sarah?" I said. "You told me your name was Connie." She looked absolutely puzzled and said, "I'm sorry, you must have me confused with someone else." "Oh, my mistake," I replied, then scratched my head and headed out of the restaurant to my car. I was embarrassed. Maybe she just didn't want to go out with me, I thought. She could have at least just said no instead of leading me on this charade. Defeated and humiliated, I decided to just head home. When I opened my car, I heard a voice behind me say, "Hey, Jason." I turned around. It was a tall, light blonde-haired woman with a large, round face and blue eyes. Do I know you?" I said to her. "It's me, Connie. We had a date planned, remember? Where are you going?" She said. We then went inside and had dinner. She was definitely Connie. She remembered all of our previous conversations over the past year, but she looked nothing like the girl that I met in class. When I asked her why she stopped wearing the green headband, she had no recollection of ever wearing or even owning that type of headband. I really can't explain this. Well, I live with my mom. And at first things would disappear, like I would leave my phone charger on the table and it would disappear, and then 5 minutes later it would appear on the table. First I was like, okay, whatever. And then it started happening more and more, often with other things. One time while I was at work, my mom called me and she was like, "Did you change your bed sheets?" I'm like, "What? I still have the same blue ones." And she was like, "No, you have a red one." I told her that she was just imagining things, and she walked into my room that moment and she was like, "What the hell? I know I saw them as red earlier when I walked in there." I just told her it was her imagination. Now this other thing that just happened too, and both of us confirmed that something is happening. It's something strange. We were at Walmart the other day and she got a bottle of some hand soap, and she was like, "Smell it?" I say it smells good, like lemon. And I read the label in front of her very clearly. Lemon scented hand soap. I told her perfect. We can put this one in the bathroom to wash our hands. A few days pass, and today I finished using the restroom and I was going to wash my hands, but we had no soap. I asked my mom where the lemon hand soap we bought the other day was. She told me it was under the sink, so I went and grabbed it. I opened it, and I squeezed the nozzle. It wasn't soapy, and it was a weird texture. I'm just like, okay. So I called my mom to the restroom and I tell her this soap doesn't work. She was like, "How strange." She picked it up and her face went pale. I asked her what was wrong, and she was like, "Remember you read the label the other day and it clearly said lemon-scented hand soap?" I say, "Yeah, why?" She turned the bottle around and it said lemon-scented body lotion. I instantly knew that was wrong. I'm just like, what the hell? And that just confirms what I was suspecting all along. That we've been having a lot of glitches lately, or maybe even going to parallel universes or something. I know it sounds lame, but I'm glad that I now have my mom as a witness to this thing that happened, and I'm not just crazy or imagining things. What do you guys think's happening? Glitch? Parallel universe switch? Or could the house just be haunted, and some ghosts are messing with us? I was reminded of this today, as it happened 9 years ago, on the 23rd of August, 2013. The day is the birthday of one of my exes, an ex-dom play partner to be specific. It was a weekday. I had arranged to meet her after work in a restaurant/pub in East London for a drink and food, and to give her a little mark of my respect, a sterling silver claw ring. It was in a presentation box, probably 3 by 3 by 2 inches, and in a gift bag with a card. I had put it in my boot because East London, and I drove to the pub. I went to get it out of the boot, and there was the bag, but no box or card. Neither should have fallen out. The boot was quite small, and the bag was still upright, supported by the chassis on one side and a picnic blanket against it. Other than the blanket and a few small bits and pieces, the boot was mostly empty. I pulled out the blanket and searched every corner, every nook and cranny. I swear I searched that boot several times, shook the blanket. I even turned the empty bag upside down. The box was too big to just be overlooked in a corner, and the card was large, white, and oblong, which would have stood out against the dark gray boot upholstery. You have to realize that I had hinted that I had something pretty damn special, and this was not just an embarrassment. This was a major relationship disaster. I searched every inch of the car and spent so long with it, I was late for our meeting, which ticked her off to begin with. The evening was a bit of a disaster. The pub was noisy and crowded. She didn't get the promised present, not even a card. She didn't like the food and, long story short, she hinted that she could have spent the evening with someone who actually gave her some respect. We pretty much split up that night. I went home a lot earlier than expected, and I didn't look in the boot until the next day. There was the picnic blanket where I had thrown it in the car, and there, literally sitting on top of the blanket, was a card and a presentation box. I tore up the card and kept the claw ring, which I gave to another friend a few months later. So, I know that this is going to sound weird and ridiculous, but the craziest thing happened at Walmart yesterday that kind of freaked me out for a while. So, me and my girlfriend go to Walmart pretty frequently. It's cheap, and sometimes they have some really cool Disney and anime shirts and stuff that we like, and it's only 5 minutes from our house. So, she told me she was gonna go check out the women's clothes to see if they have any biker shorts, while I was gonna go to the men's section to see if they had any new anime or Disney shirts. We decided that I would just meet back with her since the registers are right in front of the women's clothing, and then we would go. When I was done checking the men's stuff, I see my girlfriend walking toward the food section, and in my head I was wondering why she was going there. So I started following her to catch up to her, and I see her suddenly turn left. So I ran and turned left, and no one was there. It was an empty aisle, and I was kind of confused, so I ran some more looking for her, thinking that she was messing with me, and maybe just went to the next aisle. And legit, there wasn't anybody near there. I was confused on where she would have gone. So I decided to just call her up, and I said, "Hey, where are you? Why'd you go to the food aisle? I told you I would meet back up with you in the women's clothes." She said, "I am in the women's clothes. I've been in the same spot." I immediately said, "I just saw you walk here," referring to the section I'm at, and she was really confused. I ran towards the women's section and found her, and I told her what happened and what I saw, and she said that maybe I mistook someone else for her. But my girlfriend is a pretty distinct girl. She's 5'9" and has really long blonde hair, and is decked out completely in Disney. She was definitely weirded out, but kind of just shrugged it off. Honestly, I have no clue what happened. I was only like 7 feet from her when she turned down the aisle, and I don't think she would have made it all the way down to the next aisle by the time I turned into it. And I ran the entire vicinity looking for her because I thought it was weird. She was legit trying on clothes when I met back up with her at the women's section. Who the hell did I see? Or what was it? The fact this happened at Walmart of all places is weird in and of itself, but it really did freak me out. Edit. I know people are gonna think, oh, you just saw someone who looked like your girlfriend. But she was wearing something very specific. A Disneyland jersey, which you get only from the park with Disney Crocs. We live in a retirement town near a res in the valley, so not many 5'9" blonde girls decked out in Disney here. Plus, the girl I saw disappeared basically into thin air, so even if it was a girl who just looked like my girlfriend, it was still weird as hell. The story is by JM1701. So, it was pretty recent, around 2018, and it was just before 3 p.m. and a clear summer day. The sky was totally blue. I was completely sober, as was my mom, who was with me. I feel like I need to preface this, as both my mother and I questioned what happened at the time, mostly our sanity. The day started normal. It was around 11 a.m. when my technology started bugging out. Not weird. It could have been down to anything, but in all honesty, looking back, it added to the strangeness of what was about to happen, related or not. My mother and myself went to pick up my younger sister, who was 10 at the time, from school, as it was just before 3 p.m. It's maybe a 15 to 20 minute walk from home to the school. The first 5 minutes were a breeze. I was on the phone with a friend finishing our conversation, and when I went to hang up, my phone started freaking out. It sounded exactly like that early 2000s noise when you're sat at the computer with speakers and a call comes in. It's that static beeping interference noise. I'm not sure how to explain it, but if you've lived through those times, you'll know exactly what I mean. Regardless, I put it down to it being just another odd thing. Things happen. It's whatever. This is where the strange part happened. I put my phone in my pocket and continued walking with my mother. We walked past a bus stop, and as soon as we walked past it, it was like time stood still. There was a weird cloud. It almost looked like it was a square. The sky turned a dark gray. Like I said, this was a clear summer's day. No cloud in sight when we set off. We were initially walking up the path. There were plenty of cars and the sound of engines. When we got to this bus stop, nothing. No cars, no people. which was strange because it was the time when all the kids were coming out of school. And strangest of all, there was no sound of wind or nature. I know that makes no sense because of course there wouldn't be wind on a summer's day, but I mean no noise at all. Complete silence. It felt like we were walking in a ghost land. It was eerily silent for what should have been a lively few minutes. I can't put into words how quiet it was. We walked for what felt like hours, and we both felt like we were retracing our steps until we came to the end of the road and things slowly went back to how they were. It felt almost like hiking in a high altitude. As soon as my mother and I walked by that bus stop, it felt like the world stood still, and the sky looked entirely different from what we had seen a few seconds ago before we walked by the bus stop. Neither of us can explain it, and we still talk about it every so often. If anyone can explain this at all or tell me a similar experience, I would be grateful. The OP was then asked a few questions and answered them in the comments. In this question, the person had asked if they had walked this route many times before, and the OP said, "The route was very familiar. I went to the same school as a kid, so I've walked this route hundreds of times. I could probably walk the route blindfolded. The road seemed to elongate, not physically or visually, it just felt like it. It felt like we were walking for what felt like forever. Again, it was in a weird silence while seeing the cloud and gray sky. I wish I could explain it better, but it truly just felt like we walked into an abandoned area for hours along with the visual anomalies." Another person asked them to tell them about the square cloud, and then asked them if they lost their sense of smell. The OP responded, "I'm not entirely sure how to explain it. The only way I can describe it, it was as if the clouds had a corner. To the left of us was the sharp corner, and to the right of us the cloud was a little fluffier, but it definitely had an edge and a corner. I don't remember losing my sense of smell, though. I might have, but I've spoken to my mother who experienced this with me, and both of us just remember losing all sense of self. We both remember not having any senses. And I mean that as in no sensation in our body in regards to scent, touch, taste, etc., other than pure confusion. The overwhelming feeling was, what the hell am I witnessing? But no sense of impending doom. Again, not quite sure how to explain it. It just felt like an out-of-body experience with a lot of surreal confusion. This just happened to me tonight, and I'm wondering if anybody has experienced anything similar. So, I get home from work around 11 p.m., and by then everyone else in the house is in bed sleeping. I walk through my front door and I hear that the TV is on, so my first thought is that my brother is still awake watching TV, which I thought was a little weird, but not too weird because he would rarely be up when I get home. Anyways, I was going to go into the living room expecting to see him and to say, "What are you doing still awake?" But he wasn't on the couch. I then thought to myself, he must have just gone to bed without shutting off the TV. I then went to the bathroom, maybe for 5 minutes tops. I come back out and sit at the kitchen table. The way the house is set up, you can't really see the couch from the kitchen, but you can see the footrest of the recliner on the couch. And so, when I sat down at the table, I looked over and saw his foot on the recliner. Then I got up, and sure enough, he was sound asleep on the couch. I was really questioning myself at this point, so I needed clarification as to if he had just been there since I'd gotten home from work, or if he got up in between the time I checked the couch and he wasn't there, and the time I was in the bathroom for. Anyways, I woke him up and asked him if he's been there the whole time since I got home. His response was just, "I don't know, I think so." Basically still half asleep. Moral of the story? I'm just thinking I missed him on the couch, but I remember clear as day checking to see if he was there. And he wasn't. I have trees and shrubs in my front yard, and to ensure that they get adequate water, I have one of those drip systems made out of that black plastic hosing and smaller tubes/bubblers that lead to each tree well. There are about 10 trees and 5 shrubs that receive water this way. The other day I noticed that the lemon tree was looking dry, so I assumed the bubbler might have been clogged. It happens due to the alkaline in the groundwater. I went over to clean it, but I couldn't see the bubbler in the tree well. I dug around a little, and I still couldn't find it. I didn't notice until then that there was no water tubing that led from the large hose to the lemon tree either. The tubing and the bubbler were both gone, so the tree wasn't getting any water. This doesn't make sense for a couple of reasons. I live in a very hot, dry climate, and there's no way the lemon tree would have lived without this source of water. The lemon tree is a year old. It wasn't planted recently and only started showing signs of dehydration. The water tube's attached to the main hose by puncturing it and using a pointed attachment to divert water. If the water tube and bubbler were somehow yanked out of the main hose, there would still be a hole in the main hose, and when I turned the faucet on, water would shoot out of said hole. That didn't happen. There was no hole. I was so confused about what happened to the lemon tree's water attachment that I went around the whole yard examining the main hose for any attachments that didn't appear to lead anywhere, just in case the whole thing somehow got buried in the yard or tree well. I literally traced every single attachment on that hose to its respective tree. There were no extra attachments, and there were no empty holes. The way it looked, that attachment never existed, though I know that it did. It doesn't make any sense. That type of hose doesn't close up on its own. When there's a hole in it, it stays there, even in hot weather. That lemon tree could not have survived a week without water, much less a year. And there's no way that it just received the water it needed from a neighboring tree because they're all quite spread out. I know for a fact that when I planted that lemon tree, I put a bubbler in it. I've adjusted that same bubbler countless times when watering the trees. I know it was there, and now it isn't. I don't understand what on earth happened. So that was this week's Glitch in the Matrix collection, a collection of strange, weird, and odd stories for your enjoyment. Hopefully you did enjoy them. Definitely some weird stuff going on here. And yeah, I obviously enjoyed them, otherwise I wouldn't have read them, right? That's kind of how that works. And of course, if you did enjoy them, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. If you didn't, you can hit the thumbs down button. That's entirely your choice. It's a valid one. If you would like to hear more stories like this, you can leave me a subscribe if you're not subscribed. I almost said the wrong thing. So subscribe if you're not subscribed yet, if you want to hear more like this. Every Monday we do glitch stories, Wednesday and Friday other stuff, so you know how it goes. And yeah, one of the other things you can do is what we call the word of the week, which means you leave me a comment with the word of the week. On the screen now, and a few seconds prior to now, is a nice, lovely collection of all the words, the sentences that were left by people for last week's Word of the Week. Each one of them valid and each one of them amazing. So thank you to each and every single one of you. I hope you know I genuinely appreciate all of this. Now, this week's Word of the Week. I chose to go with the word wonder. W-O-N-D-E-R. Now, wonder is a wonderful word. It means a cause of astonishment or admiration, quality of exciting, amazed admiration. To be in a state of wonder or feel surprise, or to feel curiosity or doubt. I wonder what you're going to say in your sentence for this week's Word of the Week. And that's my hat. I threw my hat in the ring there. So, anyways, I hope you all have a beautiful day. I hope I see you on the next video. But my friends, until then, I hope that you sleep well.